Thank you for being here with We are on fire for life, I tell you. We truly are on fire. And very happy that of all the places that you could tune in and all the gazillion self-helpers that you've chosen to be here today with me and my beloved friend TJ Woodward. We've been on this journey for a long time now. I think our relationship, we've been like 15 years. Um, we've supported each other through many changes and mostly through our careers and various things that we're interested in. And two Leos, so that tells you a lot about us right there, which means that both of us have had lots of therapy, as has everyone else that's ever loved us. So that's what we're talking about. But anyway, all kidding aside, TJ Woodward is a mover, a shaker. He has done so much for the conscious recovery movement. He has put new understanding and wisdom into people not only getting out of addiction situations, but staying out of them and having the skill set and the tools to be healthy. And, I think, TJ, that's one of the things that you and I could talk about today is that often um, people who are getting off of addiction, drugs, different things, addicted to carbs, addicted to dysfunction, addicted to abuse, addicted to drugs or alcohol. I had three or four of those in there. It implies, I think, to a lot of people, and I don't know if it's the bad teaching of traditional Christianity. It's probably a 10-hour conversation, but why is it, do you think, that people feel like because they no longer get to do that, that it has to be a struggle?
Such a
That
great
was a
question.
long that was a long-winded question, but I don't believe it does. I know you don't believe it has to be a struggle. So where is the root of that, you think?
I think the root of that is in human consciousness itself. I think if you
Mm,
look at whether we're looking at the recovery movement or whether we're looking at the medical system or religion or a lot of different
mhm,
political groups, there is this tendency to think that we're struggling, right? We hear,
mhm.
I have been so aware that we use the term she lost her battle with cancer in someone's obituary. I mean, what a way to send someone off, right, from this
Right.
life. They've had this
Uh-huh.
beautiful life, they've had family, they've had connection, they've had love. And then the last thing we say is they lost the battle. So I think there's a consciousness that we're all swimming in. And
Mhm.
until we wake up, and you and I'm going to just say, you and I have woken up and realized how important it is to look at how we're perceiving the world. So I think in
Mhm.
that way, the whole idea of struggling with addiction is just like the rest of the world in the way that we get programmed to believe that life is difficult. As our friend Sue Morter says, life is challenging and it's difficult until it's not.
Yeah. Isn't that truth? And it's like, I think one of the questions is, why would anyone be comfortable being small? And I'm not talking about the size of the physical body or the muscles in your arm. Check that out. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about choosing to be small energetically. And um, I love that story about the naturalist that goes and passes the chickens and realizes there's an eagle there and goes to the farmer and says, "Do you realize in the midst of those chickens you have an eagle?" And the farmer says, "Well, him there eat some chicken food. He hangs out with the chickens. Oh, to me, he's just a chicken." And the naturalist goes, "No, he's an eagle." And so anyway, he takes the eagle out and he goes, "You're an eagle. You represent freedom. You are all that. You're big in your energetic field." And the eagle's like tapping into it, but then looks back at what is comfortable and runs and joins the chickens. Ultimately, the eagle flies away. Um, but I believe and know that you're absolutely correct that people allow their minds to be programmed. over and over again to just go with the flow of where everybody else is going, and just accept, what's right in front of you instead of aiming higher. But I declare, some people I've met, this is an awful thing to say, but they make being sober so miserable. I quite frankly, I don't even know why they are. It's like, and it's sad because there's so much joy in being awake and conscious. There's so much joy in remembering. I remember a little kid, well, a 20-year-old said to me one day, he said, "Well, don't you find it hard being sober?" 36 years now. He goes, "Don't you find it hard?" And I said, "Son, hard is, let me tell you what hard is. When I didn't remember where my car was,
Mm.
when I didn't remember who I was with the day before, I didn't know my name sometimes. Um, I apologized for myself just about every day I lived. That's
Mm.
hard. That's
Mhm.
hard. Being awake, uh, it's not a deal, you know."
Yeah, it's interesting because I think there is this paradigm that's very prevalent in the recovery movement where we tell each other or we're being told that we have this disease or that we have something that's fundamentally different about ourselves. And we interpret that, or a lot of people interpret that as there's something wrong with us, right? There's something fundamentally wrong with us. And then we get these labels, we're addicts, we're alcoholics. And the truth is, we're infinite beings. You and I know that. We come into the world as infinite beings. And then we get programmed by the world, consciously or unconsciously. People who are maybe well-meaning. I mean, I think of my mother. She had this sensitive little son that was born in 1965 in Indiana, and she said to me, like, the world is a very, very tough place, and I don't want you to get hurt, so I'm going to toughen you up, right? That was her point of view. She was doing it from a place where she thought she was helping, but what she was doing is telling me, please restrict your energy field because it's not safe to be you. And she didn't use those
Mm.
words, but I remember thinking, oh, I need to be careful. And I remember being really young and feeling so much joy and so much expansiveness, and life is so beautiful. And then that experience diminishing, and then I started believing I was broken. And so alcohol, drugs, any other thing that we might call an addictive behavior is really bringing relief from that, right? Until it starts causing problems. So you and I know putting down that substance is the beginning. The real journey is a journey of returning to that infinite being and unlearning all those stories and ideas that maybe we've picked up about ourselves in the world that keep us small and limited. And sometimes we have groups of people that co-sign on the let's stay small, right? And
Yeah.
so you and I are like, let's vibrate in a bigger way. Let's just make a difference here on planet Earth. And it's more fun this way, that's for sure.
It's definitely more fun. Well, it reminds me of that statement by Alvin Toffler. He said that the illiterate of the 21st century aren't the people who cannot read or write. It's the people who are unwilling to unlearn,
Yeah.
learn, and relearn again. And that's a daily thing,
Yes.
to unlearn, learn, and relearn again. Um, and I think it's interesting and beautiful, along the journey that you and I found each other. And whenever we talk, and we do talk pretty frequently, but we're always so parallel.
Yes.
And it's like you and I, along the way, a number of years ago, actually, probably 10, we both had this pivotal shift that says, I am not broken.
Yeah.
And if you're tuning in, leave your comments, ask us some questions, interact with us. But it's like, I am not broken. Now, commercialization, pharmaceuticals, um,
Mhm.
people who have power over other people, false power, um, products to stay, fake good young, or whatever it is. It's like there needs to be that level that you're broken, and we can hook you, because if you're broken, you're vulnerable. If you're vulnerable, you're more apt to want to be fixed. And if you want to be fixed, you're going to buy, you're going to enroll, you're going to, do this. And I know you and I have talked about the self-help industry has never been more popular, but where's the self-helping going on? Because we're not broken. So if we could learn to come from a place of wholeness and we start there, it's such a different walk. The day becomes different, the relationships become different because we're not like Velcro just taking everything on from the capacity of something's missing. We're actually being that observer of I'm whole, I'm in my wholeness.
Yes.
And so how does this impact me now? Kind of thing.
Yeah. And what I love about that is as a starting point to understand, and if someone's watching right now and they're like, but I do feel broken or I don't feel whole, then we can start playing with the idea that maybe you came in that way. And one
Mm.
way to work with this is just to look at a beautiful infant and look at just how precious that spirit is. And you can feel that love. It's just pure love, right? Because they haven't been programmed yet to believe they're limited, not good enough, something's wrong with them. Why are you left-handed? Why are you LGBTQ? Why are you tall? Why are you heavier than some people? Why is your skin color? I mean, all the things that we get programmed to believe that there's something different or wrong about us. And so if you're watching and you're like, well, that sounds great, but how do I do it? Think about that little infant and imagine that you came in that way, and that really the journey, whether we call it a spiritual journey or recovery or 20 years in therapy, the journey is really about returning to that place. And then, as Temple said so beautifully, like, what do we need to unlearn along the way so that we can have that great remembering? To know there's a place within us that's unharmed and unharmable as a starting point for our journey changes everything, because then it's like, oh, I am whole and complete. Now let me take a look at all these ideas I've had. Oh, isn't it interesting that I'm thinking that? And then we can start to catch the limiting thoughts, not from a place of judgment, but from like, oh yeah, I've been thinking that for 20 years. No wonder this keeps happening. Not because I've done something wrong, but because I've been practicing this idea that the consciousness of my belief comes to me. So we can start to shift that. And then we can start to question every point of view we've ever had. And then it really becomes a fun journey, and it becomes an experiment, because in the end, it's like, let me try this and see what happens. Let me see if I have a different point of view about the world and see what happens.
Oh, that's beautiful. I want to welcome my friend Linda. We've been friends since 1977.
Oh, wow. I love that.
So, we were just a couple of years old at the time, right?
Yes, of course, of
But
course.
yeah, and one of the things that I did in my early days of recovery, and I still do this every year. I ask myself, who's in my boat?
Mm,
As obviously a figure of speech, but who's in my boat? Do I have extremely wealthy people in my boat?
yeah.
Do I have people who approach life healthy in my boat? Do I have some people that, oddly enough, didn't grow up with that much dysfunction? There are people that exist.
Yeah.
That is true. I am not one
I
of
met
them.
one of them once.
I am, I am not one of them. But there are people that actually um, grew up in a relatively healthy family, and so that's real important. I think every year to look at who are you surrounding yourself with,
Mhm.
and in the early days of sobriety, I was with people that really challenged me because
Hmm.
they weren't chocolate obsessive, they weren't alcoholics, they didn't drink, they didn't smoke. Um, they they held life in a different way than I had ever been exposed to. And so, yes, it was confrontive. There would be times it was uncomfortable, but
Mhm.
I knew that as I stayed in that energy, that it would affect me and that it would influence me. And that's exactly, what it did. But it's giving yourself a window towards permanent change. And when you really embrace the fact that getting back to the true you is not long term hard and
Mm,
difficult. It's this life of being an imposter, of not really being who you are, of surrounding yourself with just people that pat you on the back. Here you want some,
mhm.
we're doing okay, right? I mean, we're just getting through it, it's not that, let's just turn on the music. Um, when we're that way, there's always going to be, I think, long-term implied struggle behind the scene of that,
That's right.
you know?
Yeah, it's so important, community, and really being conscious around not like only who we're surrounding ourselves with, but who are the people that are elevating the conversation. That to me is really what's important. It's like who is holding a higher watch for me, and who am I holding a higher watch for? Right?
Yeah.
Like you and I are friends because we meet in this beautiful place where I mean, I don't know if this might be a little bit of a tangent, but I know we like tangents. But I think sometimes in our spiritual circles, there's a tendency to kind of bypass some of the quote unquote difficult emotions. We call it a spiritual bypass, right?
Oh,
Where
yeah.
everything is great. And one of the places you and I meet is this place of depth in terms of like, if I want true transformation, I'm also going to have to feel, I'm going to have to allow myself to have the physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual experience that is life, and having people that are holding that and honoring that along the path, I think is so important. So community is always important. It's like what it represents to me changes over time.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so true. Everyone, we're talking to the amazing TJ Woodward. He is a rock star in the recovery movement. I mean, he really is. You can go to his website, tjwoodward.com. You can find out various places where he speaks and what he does and get involved. He does live streaming and all different kind of things. And it's helped tens of thousands of people on a new journey of permanent recovery. Now, I know that makes some people uncomfortable, but once you really get turned on to not being in the silent witness protection program, you really want to live your life out loud. It's amazing how quickly the ripple effect will kick in, and you can have absolute joy. Um, yeah, I remember TJ when I left South Carolina and relocated to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to go to ministerial school. And I mean, I would get off the plane toasted. I don't even remember, most of it. But I remember going to a creative living kind of a therapy psychology kind of class. And there were 8 of us, and we had to commit to a year, never missing a week, unless you were dead. That's basically what you told you. You have to be dead to miss the class. Well, I was energetically dead, but I went to that class, and I remember, they asked the question, "Who are you?" And I went, "I have no idea.
Mm,
I have no idea. I can tell you who everybody else is." I can, there's that funny thing that says codependency is when they show you you die and they show you your movie of your life and you're not in it.
right. Someone else's
That's
life flashes before your eyes.
that's
Yeah.
real codependency right there. Well, that's where I was. But the good news is, and some of you might be saying, well, that's where I am. Good for you. Because now you can. Now you can start with a clean slate and be willing to walk through some of the shadow work and some of the feelings and some of the raw to become solidified into your true self. It's very exciting once you start pulling off those layers, seeking your wholeness, not
That's right.
what's wrong with you.
That's right. And knowing that underneath all of it, there is that essential place of wholeness. And knowing that as a starting point, like I said before, is such a great place to start, because then I can say, oh my gosh, I have the capacity to look at some of the trauma from my past. I have the capacity to look at some of the shame that might have been driving my addiction. I can look at the ways I've been disconnected from myself. And when I feel broken, then I look to the world to feel whole again. And when I'm walking around with my umbilical cord in my hand, plugged in to try to get fed by other situations, once I get this job, I'll be happy. Once I move to California, I'll be happy. Once I move back to somewhere else, I'll be happy. All those things that we might perceive that are outside of ourselves. And, quite frankly, the world teaches us that, when we're really little kids, what are you going to be when you grow up? And I remember thinking that's such a weird question, because here I am. I remember my nephew, when he went to kindergarten, I called him and I said, I think he was in kindergarten or first grade. And I said, how is school going, Orion? And he said, silly uncle, I'm not in school. I'm talking to you. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm doing it. I'm doing that thing where I'm teaching
Mhm,
someone to not be in the moment. And he would just instantly corrected me, because, out of the mouth of babes comes the truth. Oh, yeah, he's not in school. He's talking to me. Right. And so
mhm,
this idea that there's this, I call it a destination addiction. Once I get this, I'll be happy. Once I
mhm,
get that, I'll be free. And the truth is, freedom only happens in this moment. And it can be a permanent condition, because it's not about what's happening in the world. It's about it's happening in this inner world.
mhm. That's beautiful. So tell us about your books, because they are extremely popular, and you have three now, like in 15, 17, 2021. And I, being an author, know what that entails. A lot of commitment. So tell us the name of them and walk us through it, because we have some really great active listeners today, and they're going to want to tune into some of those.
Great. Well, my first book in 2015, Conscious Being, Awakening to Your True Nature, it really what is a culmination of, like, what is it about my life? What is the primary teaching that made a difference in my life? And that was consciousness creates reality. So how do we recognize what the level of consciousness that we're carrying around with us and how it's creating what we call reality? So conscious being is really a guide to help us wake up to a greater possibility. That's the best way I can say it. And all of my books have workbooks, because when conscious being came out, several people said, all of this sounds great, but, like, how do I actually apply it to my life? So I thought, workbooks, right? And I partner with my good friend, Dr. Adriana Popescu, for all three of my books to write workbooks, because she loves to make things more tangible. So we created a workbook so people can actually do these exercises to help them
Mm,
realize, from a place of curiosity, how am I creating my life? What does it mean to be conscious? And full transparency, I've shared this with you, Temple, before. I did not want to write a book about recovery, and my second book is conscious recovery, but I resisted it. No, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to be, like, put in pigeonholed as a recovery person. There's a lot of
mhm,
layers to that, like what is recovery and what people think recovery is. So I had to really yield to spirit. And if someone's watching doesn't know exactly what I mean by that, I have learned through spiritual practice, when an idea comes from a very deep place, a deep knowing, to yield to that is when things open up in these beautiful and miraculous ways, in ways that are much bigger than I ever could have imagined. Like, I just thought I was going to write a book about recovery, and, maybe it would help a few people, honestly, because I didn't really want to do it. But I thought,
yeah,
there was a moment, Temple, when I remembered being suicidal at 18 months sober, and remember
mm,
pain that I was in, and how the people around me didn't quite know what to do with it. They're like, don't worry about anything, just don't drink. Your life's a miracle. And I'm like, but I want to die. And I remember meeting my guide, my mentor, Mary Helen, who walked me through a transformation. And I remember exploring Eastern religion, and I remember finding unity, and all of that
mhm,
happened in those years. And I found a way to have this beautiful transformation. And I remember waking up and thinking, it is so arrogant of me to not want to write a book that can make a difference in one person's life like it did in mine. So conscious recovery was born, and it's become this worldwide movement. And honestly, I didn't know that it was going to do that. And so a lot of
Mhm.
treatment centers use it now. And I'm really grateful because it's and like we started the show with, it's a different approach to recovery, an idea that you're not broken, you're not damaged, you don't have this disease that's going to cripple you for life. You're an infinite being.
Yeah.
Those are the first two books. I can talk about the third one, or we can, I don't know where you'd like to go with that.
I don't know where I want to go with that either. That's why I love this show, just allowing hearts to share out loud. And I want to give a shout out to Greg. He's tuning in from New Zealand. And he
Wow.
actually says it's warm there. So maybe we can look at moving there. Um,
Then we'll
and,
be
uh,
happy.
and my beloved goddaughter Miracle is tuning in today too. And all of you, feel free to leave your comments. We love hearing from you. Well, with conscious recovery, it does take a lot of courage to say there could be a different way. I haven't had the opportunity in my life of, like I said, 36 years of sobriety to speak at that many places. And because one of the caveats or one of the questions is, how many meetings have you been to? And it's like, I don't know, in my whole life, maybe 10. Um, and that isn't, there's like a taboo about that,
Yeah.
like, oh, what? You don't go to meetings. But I I think for me, the fundamental root and the core for me has always been I want to be free.
Yeah.
I and whatever it is, I want to be free. I want to have enough that I don't feel enslaved to the cost of every little thing. I want to be free that squirrels don't smoke. Oh god, I love smoking. Ah, it was the coolest thing, just it was just so wonderful. But squirrels don't smoke, cows don't smoke, and there's no freedom in that. And I remember not feeling free because I was always planning who smokes, who doesn't smoke. Is it etiquette to smoke? Is there class around these people? They don't smoke. It was just too much. But yet I thought I loved it, and alcohol. So I just wanted to be free. So to stop doing something and then still not feel free.
Hmm.
I'm not going to be okay if I don't make it to the 7:30, and I won't be okay if I don't make it to the 4:30. And if you're listening, and that's what works for you, then I'm happy for you. It's not my style.
Mm.
It's To me, I would still feel enslaved and not feel free.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so I love that you took the courage to write about the core of you because that's really recovery. Recovery is the discovery of the
mhm,
core of you because when you have the core of you, it's like an old beautiful majestic tree. It
mm,
can take any kind of weather, it can take any kind of storm because the roots sustain it. And I really applaud you for that because in the very beginning, it probably didn't look like you were going to be a popular guy. But we've lived long enough in the recovery industry that people know not just one way is the only way.
that's
And
right.
I really admire you for doing that.
Well, thank you. And, I was the person who was very rigid in the beginning. And I was that person, honestly kind of right before the suicidal part, where I was like, very much, there's only one way and you need to do it this way. You need to go to a lot of meetings and you need to get a sponsor. And I was that person, Temple, because I
Mhm.
was so afraid, and I had
Yeah.
found something that saved my life. So I have so much compassion for it. And I think about 12 steps as a movement, and how profound it was at the time, and how groundbreaking and innovative.
Mhm.
And yet we evolve. And even if you read the older literature, it says more will be revealed. It says we know only a little. It
Mhm.
says there's all these things to discover. And yet something happens with the mind where it's like, well, this is the one way, right? And so I think community is so important, and people find that through meetings, or they find that through a spiritual community, and maybe they start to think that they have the answer, right? And so someone asked me once, can someone use conscious recovery as their only recovery tool? And my answer is, I hope not, because I don't ever want to think there's this one answer, right? Conscious
Yeah.
recovery is supposed to be one thing that might resonate with you. And then 3 weeks from now, it might be something new, or it might be something different, right? And so I think the recovery movement is evolving. I don't ever
Mhm.
want to look at conscious recovery as a replacement for, but in addition to whatever someone's doing. And 12-step programs saved my life for a long time. And then I went to
Mhm.
Unity for a long time, and that community saved my life, or felt like it was
Mhm.
saving my life. And I discovered that it was really about connection.
Yeah.
And the ultimate connection, as you said so beautifully, it's connecting with the core of my being and then sharing that.
Mhm.
That's a very different way to have community, whether that's a meeting or a yoga retreat, or, a coffee shop. We can do that anywhere.
Yeah, and I think that, and I thank you for highlighting that, because that's basically what I'm saying. I'm not saying that one isn't okay. I'm
Yeah,
simply saying, just like I've lived long enough to realize there's no one size fits all.
that's right.
There's just no one size fits all. And so, structure for some people is absolutely necessary. For other people, it's not. And and I didn't want to go somewhere to keep talking about my same old story. I was anxious to create a new one.
Yeah.
And so, but for some people, that's what they need. And as you were saying that, I thought, yeah, that's what was really different for me, because in coming into being in sobriety, I was enmeshed and so engaged in spiritual community, because I was in ministerial school, and so that was a huge thing for me, the mirroring and all of that, and it really, shifted a lot. There are some people that say they envision that, the institutions of spiritual community will probably fall by the wayside. I don't believe that's so. I think that we will see, through more and more climate change things that happen. I think through more things that happen worldwide. I think we will be finding ourselves, not gloom and doom, but coming together to co-create and be together in a way of community. It's we're made that way.
Yeah.
It's our DNA.
And for me, what community at currently, community is really about a group of people that will hold this different possibility. We hold that for
Mm.
each other, right? So people come together with a shared vision or a shared purpose. And sometimes the shared purpose is something, like you said, that's gloom and doom. And like there can be comfort in that, but what kind of life do I really want to create? And going back to what you were saying, who's in the boat, right? Who's
Yeah,
in my community? Like you and I, we're at a point in our relationship where we can jump on a Zoom and just be completely honest with each other of how we're feeling. And in the midst of that, we hold the highest possibility, right? We
hmm,
hold the highest possibility for each other, knowing that that's what true support is. It's not, oh, I'm so sorry you're going through that. It's like, we hold space for one another, and we also know in the midst of that that we're transforming, we're evolving. And I agree with you completely that we're always, people are always going to want to connect. There's always going to be a sense of community, and I think the new spiritual community is going to be a place where people get to hold each other in a different vibration. And of course, that's been happening for a long time, but it seems more and more important now.
Absolutely. I love one of the comments. This one's coming from Greg. I agree, reference spiritual community. We have to let renewal happen and
Yeah.
stop holding on to yesterday so tightly and not force renewal out of despair. I
Yeah.
just absolutely love that.
Me too.
And Jay Maya loves that too. Give a big old shout out to Jay Maya. He's an amazing performer and heart. Um, so in the space of that, back to the boat, or back to community, or back to family systems, or back to your lover.
Yeah.
It's about teaching people how you want to be treated. So that tends to be something, whether or not you believe in the Bible. Most of us heard, "Love your neighbor." Okay, but a lot of people didn't tell us that second part, love your neighbor as yourself. So
Yes.
that's the view, the screen, the way we see everything and everyone. And so for me, when we talk about, people in the boat, I've always wanted people that challenge me,
Yeah.
and that's why I love hanging out with you. You challenge me. I love being challenged. It's easy to get people to say, "You're so nice," or, "I like your hair," whatever. And those are niceties, and I don't take those for granted. And I'm really not being facetious. But I remember when we were talking about Barbara and I, BB and I, my wife, we were talking about that spirit kept telling me to move to California.
Mm.
And it was the last thing on my mind. It was something that had come up many times in the years, and I had always said, "No way, no way." And I'm like, how can I deny this intuitive faculty that keeps telling me this is the direction that we're to go? And I went, if I could just act like I didn't hear it, because I'm just so happy where I am. And she said to me, "You're starting to live your book." And I
Mm.
said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, it's subtle, but you're starting to act like you're dying a little." And of
Mm.
course, my term in dying is energetic dying.
Right.
And I went, "Well, thank you for that." And I meant that, "Thank you for that. Is that what you see?" "Yes, I see that. I
Mm.
see that, life's just becoming ho-hum for you and you need a change." And that's, you want people in your life, you want to have a core enough within yourself that you can take that wonderful push,
Yes.
and it's a beautiful thing to push you out of that fish aquarium so you can go, "Okay, I'm going in that unknown territory now. I've become like a mystic."
Mm.
I mean, somebody asked me the other day, "What are you doing in California?" And I said, "I don't know." I just know it's not hot here. But it's okay. It's rich and it's wonderful. Um, and I don't want everything to be an addiction. But on the other hand, looking at you and how pretty you are, I'm wondering if it's, we're also addicted to, we got to know something.
Yeah.
We need to know, because if we know, we're in control, and if we're in control, then we're in charge, and then if we're in charge, it's like, there's there's a lot of freedom in the unknown.
Well, and what's interesting about that as you're talking, I'm thinking when we know from a deeper place that you're talking about, and that is, I'm going to trust this intuition, like I talked about with conscious recovery, even though I resisted it for 6 months at least. I was like, oh, no,
Right.
no, no, no. I pushed down, pushed down. But I knew that eventually I was either going to yield to it or it was going to be painful. And I don't mean like the cosmic 2x4 kind of thing. I don't mean that. I just mean that when I'm pushing against that deep knowing, things don't open and thrive the way they do when I'm like, oh yeah, let me trust that. Now,
Mm.
trusting that knowing is really different than needing to know everything. And those two, I think, can be incongruent sometimes.
Say that again, because that's so true. Say that again.
I,
It's so
um,
true.
well, the deep knowing and the knowing are two totally different things, and they can be incongruent, right? Because my
Mhm.
mind will come in and try to either figure out what the intuition means. Like, I remember when I had an intuition to start a spiritual community when I was at Unity in San Francisco, and I was the ministerial associate, and the knowing was to start an independent New Thought community, and I was kind of like, oh, that sounds like a lot of work, which it was. It
Right.
was a lot of work because it was very easy to work, within a structure that already existed. But as soon as I had that intuition, my mind started thinking, I know exactly what it's supposed to look like,
Mm.
instead of, oh, let me be with that vision, right? And that's the difference between visualization, which is my third book, coincidentally, talking about conscious creation. It's not about like thinking I know what I want and then holding that thought and manifesting. It's like, let me abandon that to the best of my ability. Let me question every thought I had and be still enough to listen to those deeper intuitions and then yield to those, say yes to those. And sometimes there's a period of like, okay, I know I was supposed to say yes to this, but what's happening, right? Because like
Mhm.
my spiritual community didn't take off the way I wanted it to. The numbers weren't the way I wanted it to. The location didn't work out the way I wanted it to. I kept finding myself, but the deep knowing was always there. And then ultimately, like connected with agape, and like there was this beautiful thing that came out of trusting that vision. But the reason I'm saying all of this is there's a really different knowing to know that this deep intuition can guide our life. And it's very different than needing to have all the answers. As a matter of fact, when people say the longer I live, the less I know, I used to just think people were being humble. It's true. And in
Mhm.
that not knowing, there's a lot of freedom.
Well, and it also keeps you young.
That's
I mean,
true.
look at me. So you can tell I don't know very much at all. But no, it does. It just, there's something within you. I always get silly around you, but I love that. You bring out my silly.
I love that.
And my recovery of divine silliness. But no, there is something about that it does keeps you young.
Yeah,
Um, you know, and when you have the knowing, the internal knowing that you are a unique and original imprint of the divine, it comes with a responsibility.
mm,
Because you're consistently, like I said earlier, you are required by natural law to teach people how you want to be treated.
yeah,
You're required to speak your truth and speak it, boldly. It's like, on the cruise, I had pulled a muscle in my knee, and you're walking along, and somebody says, "Oh, and your knee's bothering you," and you can feel the dynamics.
yeah.
And I look at them and I go, "Uh-huh, yeah," and it did at 30 also. So
Mm,
don't go there.
yeah,
Okay, so it's the
right.
same knee, and it did that at 30 because I twisted it with a piece of luggage. So don't start the thing that you're getting ready to start, because I won't have it. But it's a constant filtering,
Yeah,
um, of who you hold in your boat, the people you surround yourself with, and it's like, people that have difficult times financially. As long as they have a club of the same people that
that's right.
have difficulty financially, it's going to be really hard to shift that.
Yeah,
It's going to be really hard. So you surround yourself with a couple of people that intimidate the heck out of you
that's right.
because they have plenty, and you absorb that. And I remember years ago in ministerial school, and I'd go out with my rich friends, and I'm going through this process like, well, or I don't know, are they going to buy? because this one thing is like $45. Am I supposed to be buying? Do you know what I mean? Am I going to look on the left side of the page or the right side of the page? And it was a decision that I would be able to look at both sides of the page and do whatever. But it requires the pushing oneself and invoking the new to come in. And
Yeah.
I think it's important that leaders like ourselves, and I wish more would do it, would talk about where they came from,
Right. Right.
because everybody has on their suit and they're talking about divine connection and enlightenment and intervention, and very few could say that they just were born that way and they stayed that way all their lives. I
Right.
think it gives hope. I think it gives hope. Like, I regret that when you were going through that phase in your life, that you were not wanting to be alive, or you were getting this thing within you of you don't need to be here, you don't need to be alive, that maybe you're going to die. Because I'm sorry I wasn't there for you, because I would have said you're getting an angelic message, because you do need to die, not
Mhm.
physically.
Absolutely.
You're getting this message that you must die so the greater you, may live. And
Absolutely.
it's up to us to align with other people so we can bring out the greater good of them. I don't
Yeah.
know what I just said. I hope it made sense,
Oh,
but
to me, it made a lot of sense because I think there's something so powerful about us telling our own stories and our own
mhm,
journeys. It's really different than saying, here's where I landed, of understanding my true nature and understanding myself as an infinite being. I think that's a beautiful thing to say. But I also want to say, I remember having that be an innate experience when I was a kid and then forgetting that. And then
yeah,
believing I was broken, and then turning to drugs and alcohol, and then turning to all sorts of behavior that really was this sense of like, there's something so wrong with me. And I kept re experiencing it. And then how I got through that is this is how I, transformed that. I think it's so powerful. And we love knowing that about each other. And
yeah,
sometimes I think it's easy, maybe it's easy for people to forget that that's an important part of the journey. How did we get to this moment? And
hmm,
to me, that's just the way I like to teach. If it's even teaching at all, it's a demonstration of like, I know this is what happened for me. Every bit of it was happening for me and for the evolution of my soul. And I'm yearning to share that with the whole world. I'm going to guess, Temple, that you were someone who might. I saw this meme on Facebook yesterday, and it's been in my mind. It's like, okay, everyone who on their report cards when they were a kid said talks too much in class, tell us about your life today. And I started thinking about like, that was me, right? And look at us now. We're using our unique gifts and skills.
you are tapping into something. I want to say hi to our brother Kevin. He's tuning in. We both love us, our Kevin Ross and Deborah. Welcome, glad you're here. Um, you're so tapping into something, because my dad was responsible for morning feeding before I went to school. So he buttered white toast, heavy on the butter, and then sprinkled white sugar.
Oh yeah,
So
I had
I
those.
go I go to school like blah, 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 blah. And yes, so my teachers met with my parents and said, truly, Temple, and I remember the car ride home. It was not pretty. But my dad was so embarrassed, because my teacher said Temple talks too much and she's never going to amount to anything.
Mm, mm,
Right. And you're right. I mean, I guess I don't know even how long she lived, but she would have lived long enough to know that that's how I've lived, is through talking and speaking and sharing.
right.
But I think there's another part there, for those of you that have children. When children talk a lot or they're acting out a lot, they need you to go beyond that and ask what is going on,
Yeah, what's really
because
happening?
there's something, it's a cry out for help. But yeah, that's so funny. You're so right. It's like, how did you know that? You're psychic too. See, it's like,
Well, of course, we all are, right? We're very attuned, and I think about that in
mm,
reverse too. I think about the people that were labeled as too quiet, right? Or the people that were labeled as too reserved. Like, we get all these labels as little kids, and sometimes
you know,
we take them on, and then that becomes our identity. And like, what does it even mean to talk too much? Like, what is that, right? What
right,
a great
right.
gift. And I love that we started the show by being Leos and like all the years of therapy because of that. And for those
Hmm.
who have loved this, the years of therapy, it is true. Sometimes I will say that I can see the look on Will, my husband's face, and I'm like, oh, I might be talking too much right now. Let me, because I'm
I'm
like,
really,
all
I'm
about it.
really proud of having therapy, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. You know,
Absolutely.
it was so worth it to pay a stranger to see something. I'm always paying for some kind of services. I'm doing it now for a whole new layer of branding because I want to. That to me is natural law, is evolving always. You
Mm,
know, it's evolving always, not stagnant, not staying the same, but what is next. So yeah, life is pretty amazing, this incredible journey. And I'm glad that you are awake and alert. And let me ask you, I know you're speaking in London. I know we have a conference that you're my buddy and you invite me to attend every year in Orange County. What other things can we find out that information on tjwoodward.com, the
yeah.
various things you're doing?
Yeah, if you go to tjwoodward.com, you can look at the events. I put everything on Facebook. That's kind of where I put what I'm up to. And yeah, I'm going to be in the UK in May, speaking at a conference and doing a workshop. I love being there and bringing this message. This, when I say this message, we're really talking about conscious recovery, because this is to a group of addiction professionals and behavioral health professionals. And when I spoke there, and Temple, you and I think we joked about this before, but the speaker before me said, I won't talk about emotions because we have an American speaking after me, and so I'll let him do it. And I love that, right? Because I get to go in there and just, be
Oh,
and 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 I love that. I love being able to present and to share ideas with people. So yeah, I'm always up to something. My passion is training. My passion is speaking. I love doing shows like this. So I'm around. You'll find me in various places. And Temple, I just love partnering with you. So the
mm.
more that we can do together, the better. So let's come up with even more.
No, that's how I feel too, and we'll have you on the show again, and I believe I'm gonna start producing some things with Mind, Body, Spirit also, because I love hanging out with all of them. Diane Ray, she
Yeah.
used to run Hay House Radio, and yeah,
Yeah.
we'll get some more things going together, and it's just a pleasure being in your energy, and I thank you that I would like to leave the idea with this because it is something I talk about often. Um, there's something that I really resonate with you, no matter what's going on, no matter where you are, no matter what is happening, because you're a human. So, things are all, life is happening. Is
Yeah.
that what I see from you is joy? What
Thank
I
you.
feel from you is joy. Obviously, power, and I'm talking about inner power, not fake power or power over somebody else. But I feel that essence of joy, and I resonate with that as a mirror because someone asked me one time, "How do you stay so joyful?" And
Mm,
I said, "It's when I learn that joy isn't the absence of isn't being absent of other things.
right.
Joy is including, this is the whole package, people. This
Yeah.
is what, one minute I'm laughing, the next minute I'm crying, the next minute I'm pondering. And joy is the bigger picture of
That's right.
just the mere pleasure of being alive.
Yeah.
And that my life expectancy is already doubled. I mean, really. I survived myself. in all the years of addiction.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, thank you, TJ. Love you lots.
I love
Thank
you
you,
too.
Randy, for tuning in. Another one of our Unity brothers there. And we're so blessed. So, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Something we've said today has touched you. Please take the time to share it with others. Um, we feel like we're a story that's living out loud. And
Hmm.
bless you on this journey. Thank you so much.